Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Oh my goodness, folks. Spring is here. And am I ever ready? As much as I love to ski and enjoy the beauty of the snowfalls, it sure is nice to have it warming up, and every once in a while having the doors open and the windows open and feeling the 60 and 70 degree air blowing through the house. Now, I've been doing these shows for close to a year, and this is the first time that I haven't been ahead of the curve when it comes to solstices and equinoxes. So, even though it's a bit belated, here is my tribute to the spring equinox. And, of course, to all of the flowers, warm weather, storms, and other delights that spring equinox implies. This year, the moment of actual equinox happened on Friday, March 20th at 5:45 in the morning. Last December, at the time of the solstice, the sun was directly over the Tropic of Capricorn. If you had been standing there with a big sombrero, you would have had a shadow cast directly down to your feet. Since then, the Earth has traveled 1/4 of the way around the sun. That means that because the Earth is tilted on its axis, as of Friday, March 20th at 5:45 in the morning, the Earth was directly where the sun is over the equator. And if you'd been at the equator with your big sombrero on, your shadow from the sombrero would have been cast directly down to your feet. The equinoxes, both in the spring and in the fall, are when the days are exactly 12 hours long and the nights are 12 hours long. It comes from a Latin word, a Latin combination of words, that means equal night. So, here we are on our beautiful blue planet, traveling around the sun, having gone past the spring or vernal equinox. Over the last year, we have looked at the going into new seasons from the perspective of the ancient Egyptian religions. The goddess of summer, Isis, was the goddess of growth and absorbing the light. The goddess Hathor for autumn is the goddess of gathering in the harvest and of enjoying the beautiful evening of the day, the time of relaxation and comfort. Last December, we looked at the god Osiris, the god of winter. He is the god of death and the god of the earth and the underground, just as, indeed, all of life does go underground. It becomes winter and things settle down. In coming to understand the ancient understandings of religion, we have to remember that the gods are not separated from life. Rather, the gods are expressions of the different seasons. The word Osiris was the word for winter, just as the word Isis was the word summer. Now, in the spring, we enter the time of life, the time of the year, that is represented by the falcon. The word falcon literally was Horus. Actually, that's a Greek interpretation of the Egyptian. It's the word that we have today. References to Horus go back well over 5,000 years. Such an important god, of course, had many myths and many stories connected to him. There were some that I would have a little trouble putting into polite enough language to be telling here on a public broadcast. But there are others that are equally as interesting. Basically, it was accepted that Horus was the child of Osiris and Lady Isis. Lady Isis, you'll remember, is the goddess of the summer, the goddess of gathering in the sunlight, of gathering in the energy for life. Osiris, of course, is the god of death and the underworld. So a child born of the two great aspects of life, the gathering in the energy and the rest of winter, obviously would be quite a child. And, of course, spring is a huge influence in life. To understand one of the very major stories of Horus, we have to know a little bit about ancient Egypt. Today, we think of Egypt as a big square box with a river running up the east side. The ancients did not see Egypt that way. The ancients saw Egypt as this. Egypt was the Nile River. It was called a lotus flower, which of course you can see why they would say that. The delta at the northern end of it makes it appear as a lotus when you pull back and look at it. As civilization began to creep into human history 10,000 years ago or so, there were two Egypts. There was Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Today, we may think that the Delta region is Upper Egypt because it's to the north, but that is not how the Egyptians saw it. The Lower Egypt, of course, is the downriver part of Egypt. Upper Egypt is the upriver part of Egypt. Literally, the change happens at about where Cairo is, just about where the delta opens up. As civilization developed on the Nile River, these were two separate lands, two separate kingdoms, two separate ways of seeing themselves. About 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years before the current era, these two separate lands were united into one land. Upper Egypt got the better hand and consolidated the entire Nile Valley into what was called Egypt. It was about this time they started building the Great Pyramids. One of the great stories of Horus was the story of uniting the Egyptian kingdom. Horus was the god of Upper Egypt. Isis, Horus's mother, had a brother. His name was Set. Set, it turns out, was the god of Upper Egypt. So the story of the battle between Horus and Set became the story of uniting Egypt and one of the kingdoms becoming dominant over the other. Set murdered Osiris, Horus's father, so there was some bad blood between them. Because Horus is a hawk or a falcon, Horus is represented by the sky. Included in that representation are the sun and the moon. In one of the many battles between Horus and Set, Set ripped out the left eye of Horus, the moon. His left eye was restored, but never to its full capacity. And that is why the moon is not as bright as the sun. And it is why the moon goes through phases. One of the parts of living in ancient Egypt was understanding that when the moon was new and not shining, Horus was blinded to the world. He did not have his left eye overlooking the world and protecting us. It was at this time that Horus was also considered dangerous. After all, he could not see if you were a friend or a foe, and he might lash out, not meaning to. Isis, the goddess of summer and the mother of Horus, gave to Horus the job of protecting the people from Set. Set was the god of the desert, storms, and chaos. So Isis saw where there was a need to protect the people from such influences. During one of their many battles, just as Horus had lost an eye, so it was that Set lost a testicle, and that is why deserts are barren. Eventually, the gods got tired of the warring between Set and Horus. They sat down and listened to arguments, some of which were rather risque, and they decided that Horus was the victor in this ancient bout, and the nation became united under the Upper Empire. Throughout Egypt, and indeed many places in the ancient world, Horus is recognized as a great and influential god. And who, after all, would want to celebrate life without celebrating spring? And just why would a hawk or a falcon represent spring? Well, when a hawk or a falcon fly, they do not need to flap their wings. They can just hold their wings out, and the air will lift them up into the sky. Of course, to the uneducated and the superstitious, the ancients would have looked at this and said, look, it's levitation. These creatures just go into the sky, they belong there. The scientists and the learned people, of course, understood that there were wind gusts blowing up from hills, and the eagles and the hawks were using those to ride the air. However, whether it's understood scientifically or superstitiously, the bottom line is that hawks, falcons, and eagles have always been understood to be symbols of how life rises up, how life ascends effortlessly into the heavens. Just as the dung beetle gave us the concept of life resurrecting itself out of nothing, so it is that the hawk, Horus, the god of spring, the god that is every male of every species, Horus represents life ascending effortlessly. And just as we, in springtime, recognize the resurrection of life in what we call the celebration of Easter, so the ancients understood in springtime the resurrection of the glory of Horus, the glory of life.
Let's get into old MacDonald's overalls and play E-I-E-I-O. It's East Idaho. East Idaho. Wow. It's not a very long drive, folks, and there are some mighty interesting things to check out over on the great eastern side of Idaho.
In past episodes of EIEIO, we've gone and looked at the beautiful Henry Fork country. And then we headed down south of Pocatello, checking out beautiful southeast Idaho. We got off of the freeway on Highway 91 and went and explored the amazing thing that happened at Red Rock Pass. At Red Rock Pass, we considered what happened when the land washed away and Lake Bonneville was allowed to go rushing into the Snake River. And we discovered how this unique feature called melon gravel, which is found all over southern Idaho along the Snake River, was not due to centuries of erosion, but rather mere minutes, as these rocks, the size of small school buses, weighing 1.5 tons, were ripped from the canyon walls and washed down the river like so much sand. Here at Red Rock Pass, we took a look at the gaping hole, 3/4 mile wide, 300 feet deep, where Lake Bonneville let out as much water as half of Lake Michigan. Here is where the water was running away from the pass. And here is where Lake Bonneville would have been filling the valley. Remember the little road the truck was pulling out on? That road takes off of Highway 91. It is called County Road D1. Well, your beer-drinking guide loves to take obscure little roads. So today we're going to take this little byway D1 down through Oxford and Clifton and Dayton. Of the 3 communities on County Road D1, we couldn't find one of them that was large enough to have a cafe. As we approach the end of County Road D1, we enter the lovely town of Dayton. At the south end of Dayton, we catch Highway 36 heading east toward Preston, for no other reason that we were hungry and looking for a cafe. Not that we minded a bit. The 7 miles over to Preston is as lovely a drive as any. After 4 or 5 miles of beautiful farmland, we dipped down to cross the Bear River and then back up a hill to Preston. Preston is quite the lovely farm town right on US Highway 91. We had noticed a little cafe that looked amusing as we were entering town, so we headed back to Highway 36, heading west, and stopped by a little cafe with red checkered tablecloths. You can't go wrong with red checkered tablecloths, folks. My Reuben sandwich was satisfyingly greasy, but Harold's eggs, hash browns, and sausage gravy made my Reuben sandwich look like it was as dry as a bone. This little cafe is called the Roadster's Grill, and just as it satisfied our hunger for food, it satisfied its name of the Roadsters. I enjoyed the GTO's motto, a flying machine for people who can't stand heights. Included free with the decorations is some mighty good advice. When disaster strikes, don't send a stooge. Send 3. I happen to be working on this episode of the Beer Drinker's Guide on the 3rd of March, 3309. Just happens to be a date that is its own square root. Through circumstances beyond my control, for some reason I decided to take a little drive up to Arrowrock Dam and check it out. When I saw water coming through the holes in the upper part of the dam, I was rather surprised to see the reservoir that full so early in March. While contemplating that, I was also surprised to see there's construction going on. For years I've heard talk of putting a power plant at Arrowrock, but I had no idea that they would have begun construction. So I really didn't know what was going on. I did, however, notice a little shack up by the gate where you go over onto the dam. And I thought, well, I'll stop and ask. Sure enough, this young lady named Jay was at the shack, enjoying watching the eagles, the foxes, the elk, and everything else she could think of to name. She also told me that yes, indeed, they are building a power plant at Arrowrock. Here are some photographs that I found at the website for the company that is going to be buying the power. The 5 irrigation districts that have the right to the water at Arrowrock are building the $41 million project. It's going to have 2 turbines that will put out 15 megawatts, about enough to serve 5,400 homes. They were originally going to build a plant for 60 megawatts. It would have been much more expensive to build, and the 60 megawatts would really only be available a short time of every year because irrigation dams have varying amounts of water behind them. So it was decided to build 2 turbines that combined would put out 15 megawatts. It was also decided to use existing exit tubes for the penstocks, save the whole headache of building holes through the dam. The irrigation districts also built the power plant at Lucky Peak Dam, which puts out 101 megawatts, and the power is sold to Seattle City Light. The Clatskanie People's Utility District in Northwest Oregon has a 30-year contract for the power with the right to re-up for another 30 years. While I was up on the top of the dam, I decided to go back and look at the reservoir. I was surprised how much of our beautiful green clear water is being held back so early in March. Indeed, it was enough water to come well up on the structure that holds back water from going into the spillway. Even so, there are enough leaks through the little holes in this spillway entrance that it does provide for a rather lively little trickle of water coming down the old spillway chute. As fun as this bit of a trickle is, it's nothing compared to what it used to look like when they just let the river run through the spillway when the dam was full. They hope that you will never see this sight again. It was terribly hard on the bull trout, and it has been decided not to use the spillway except under extreme emergencies. One morning, Bob got a call from his best friend Bill asking if they could get together for lunch. Bob said, "Well, I'm kind of busy, but if it's important, well, sure, let's get together for lunch." As soon as they got together, Bill says, "Oh man, Bob," he says, "I think my wife is dealing drugs." Bob was practically knocked off his chair. "Oh, come on, Bill," he says. "We've known Jill ever since we were both in junior high school. How can you think that she's possibly dealing drugs?" "Well," said Bill, "this morning I was running a little late to work and the phone rang just before I was going out the door. So I grabbed it, and before I could even say hello or anything, there's this guy on the other end. And he says, 'Hi, honey, is the dope gone yet?'" And that's this week's Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo.